Chapter 1, Introducing Indian Society. In one important sense, sociology is unlike any other subject that you may have studied. It is a subject in which no one starts from zero. Everyone already knows something about society. Other subjects are learned because they are taught at school, at home, or elsewhere. But much of our knowledge about society is acquired without explicit teaching. Because it is such an integral part of the process of growing up, knowledge about society seems to be acquired naturally or automatically. No child is expected to already know something about history, geography, psychology, or economics when they come to school. But even a 6-year old already knows something about society and social relationships. It is all the more true then that as young 18-year-old adults, you know a lot about the society you live in without ever having studied it. This prior knowledge or familiarity with society is both an advantage and a disadvantage for sociology, the discipline that studies society. The advantage is that students are generally not afraid of sociology, they feel that it can't be a very hard subject to learn. The disadvantage is that prior knowledge can be a problem. In order to learn sociology, we need to unlearn what we already know about society. In fact, the initial stage of learning sociology consists mainly of such unlearning. This is necessary because our prior knowledge about society, our common sense, is acquired from a particular viewpoint. This is the viewpoint of the social group and the social environment that we are socialized into. Our social context shapes our opinions, beliefs, and expectations about society and social relations. These beliefs are not necessarily wrong, though they can be. The problem is that they are partial. The word partial is being used here in two different senses: incomplete and biased. So, our unlearned knowledge or common sense usually allow us to see only a part of social reality. Moreover, it is liable to be tilted towards the viewpoints and interest of our own social group. Sociology does not offer a solution to this problem in form of a perspective that can show us the whole of the reality in a completely unbiased way. Indeed, sociologists believe that such an ideal vantage point does not exist. We can only see by standing somewhere, and every somewhere offers only a partial view of the world. What sociology offers is to teach us how to see the world from many vantage points, not just our own, but also that of others unlike ourselves. Each vantage point provides only a partial view, but by comparing what the world looks like from the eyes of different kinds of people, we get some sense of what the whole might look like and what is hidden from view in each specific standpoint. What may be even more interest to you is that sociology can show you what you look like to others. It can teach you how to look at yourself from outside. So to speak, this is called self-reflexivity, or sometimes just reflexivity. This is the ability to reflect upon yourself, to turn back your gaze, which is usually directed outward, back towards yourself. But this self inspection must be critical, that is, it should be quick to criticize and slow to praise oneself. At the simplest level, you could say that understanding Indian society and its structures provides a sort of social map on which you could locate yourself, like a geographical map. Locating oneself on a social map can be useful in the sense that you know where you are in relation to others in society. For example, suppose you live in the state of Arunachal Pradesh. If you look at the geographical map of India, you know that your state is in the northeastern corner of India. You also know that state is small compared to many large states such as Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, or Rajasthan. but that it is larger than many others, such as Manipur, Goa, Haryana, or Punjab. If you look at the physical features of map, it could tell you what kind of terrain Arunachal has compared to other states and regions of India, and what natural resources it is rich in, and so on. A comparable social map would tell you where you are located in society. For example, as 17 or 18-year-old, you belong to a social group called young people. People your age or younger account for about 40% of India's population. You might belong to a particular region or linguistic community, such as Gujarati speaker from Gujarat or Telugu speaker from Andhra Pradesh. Depending on your parents' occupation and your family income, you would also be a member of an economic class, such as lower, middle, or upper. You could be a member of particular religious community, caste, or tribe, or such social group. Each of these identities would locate you on a social map and among a web of social relationships. Sociology tells you what kinds of groups or groupings are there in society, what their relationships are to each other, and what might mean in terms of their own life. But sociology can do more than simply help to locate you or others in this simple sense of describing the places of different social groups. As C. Wright Mills, a well known American sociologist, has written, sociology can help you to map the links and connection between personal troubles and social issues. By personal troubles mean that the kinds of individual worries, problems, or concerns that everyone has. So, for example, you may be unhappy about the way elders in your family treat you, or how your brothers, sisters, or friends treat you. You may be worried about your future and what sort of job you might get. Other aspects of your individual identity may be sources of pride, tension, confidence, or embarrassment in different ways. But all of these about one person and derive meaning from this personalized perspective. A social issue, on the other hand, is about large groups and not about the individual who make them up. Thus, the generation gap or friction between older and younger generations is a social phenomena common to many societies in many time periods. Unemployment or the effects of changing occupational structure is also a societal issue that concerns millions of different kinds of people. It includes, for example, the sudden increase in job prospects for information technology related professions as well as declining demand for agricultural labor. Issues of communalism or the animosity of one religious community towards another or casteism is the exclusion or oppression of some caste by others are again society wide problems. Different individuals may be implicated in them in different roles depending on their social location. Thus, a person from so called upper caste who believes in the inferiority of the people born into so called lower caste is involved in casteism as a perpetrator, while a member so called low caste community is also involved but as a victim. In the same way, both men and women as distinct social groups are affected by gender inequalities but in very different ways. One version of such map is already provided to us in childhood by the process of socialization, or the ways in which we are taught to make sense of world around us. This is the common sense map. But as pointed out earlier, this kind of map can be misleading and it can distort once we leave our common sense maps behind. There are no other ready-made maps available to us because we have been socialized into only one, not several or all, social groups. If you want other kinds of maps, we must learn how to draw them. A sociological perspective teaches you how to draw social maps. Introducing an introduction. This entire book is meant to introduce you to Indian society from a sociological rather than common sense point of view. What can be said by the way of an introduction or to this introduction? Perhaps it would be appropriate at this point to indicate in advance the larger processes that were at work in shaping Indian society, processes that we will encounter in detail in the following pages. Broadly speaking, it was in the colonial period that a specifically Indian consciousness took shape. Colonial rule unified all of the India for the first time and brought in the forces of modernization and capitalist economic change. By and large, the changes brought about were irreversible. Society could never return to the way things were before. The economic, political, and administrative unification of India under colonial rule was achieved at great expense. Colonial exploitation and domination scared Indian society in many ways, but paradoxically, colonialism also gave birth to its own enemy, nationalism. Historically, an Indian nationalism took shape under British colonialism. The shared experience of colonial domination helped unify and energize different sections of the community. The emerging middle classes began, with the aid of colonialism, Western style education to challenge colonialism on its ground. Ironically, colonialism and Western education also gave the impetus for the rediscovery of tradition. This led to developments on the culture and social front, which solidified emergent forms of community at national and regional levels. Colonialism created new classes and communities which came to play significant roles in subsequent history. The urban middle classes were the main carriers of nationalism and they led the campaign for freedom. Colonial interventions also crystallized religious and caste based communities. These two become major players. The complex ways in the subsequent history of contemporary Indian society evolved is something you will encounter in the following chapters. Preview of this book. In this, the first two textbooks on sociology, you will be introduced to the basic structure of Indian society. We begin with a discussion of demographic structure of Indian population. As you know, India is currently the most populous country in the world and in a few decades is projected to overtake China and become the most populous country in the world. What are the ways in which sociologists and demographers study a population? Which aspects of the population are socially significant? And what can be happening on these fronts? In the Indian case, is our population simply an obstacle to development? Or can it also be seen as helping development in some ways? There are some of the questions that this chapter tries to tackle. In chapter 3, we revisit the basic building blocks of Indian society in the form of institutions of caste, tribe, and family. As a unique feature of Indian subcontinent, caste has always attracted a lot of scholarly attention. How has this institution been changing over the centuries? And what does caste really mean today? What is the context in the concept of tribe was introduced in India? What sorts of communities are tribes supposed to be? And what is at stake in defining them as such? How do tribal communities define themselves in contemporary India? Finally, the family and an institution has also been subjected to tremendous pressure in these times of rapid and intense social change. What changes do we see in the diverse forms of family that exist in India? By addressing questions like these, Chapter 3 builds the base for looking further aspects of family. Chapter 4 explores the socio-cultural dimensions of the market as a powerful institution that has been the vehicle of change throughout world history. Given that the most sweeping and rapid economic changes were brought about first by colonialism and then by development policies, this chapter looks at how markets of different kinds have evolved in India and the chain reactions they set in motion. Among the features of our society that has been cause of greatest concern are its seemingly unlimited capacity for generating inequality and exclusion. Chapter 5 is devoted to this important subject. Chapter 5 looks at inequality and exclusion in the context of caste, tribe, gender, and the disabled. Notorious as an instrument of gender and the disabled, division, and justice, the caste system has been the object of concentrated attempts by the state and by the oppressed caste to reform or even abolish it? What are the concrete problems and issues that this attempt faced? How successful have movements to resist caste exclusion been in our recent past? What have been special problems of tribal movements? In what context are tribal identities reasserting themselves today? Similar questions are dealt in the context of gender relations and the disabled. To what extent is our society responsive to the needs of disabled? How much to an impact has women's movement had on social institutions that has oppressed women? Chapter 6 deals with difficult challenges posed by the immense diversity of Indian society. This chapter invites us to step outside our normal, comfortable ways of thinking. The familiar cliches and slogans about India being a land of unity and diversity have a hard and complex side to them. Despite all the failures and inadequacies, India has not done too badly on this front. What have been our strengths and weaknesses? How young adults face issues like communal conflict, regional or linguistic chauvinism, and casteism without either wishing them away or being overwhelmed by them. Why is it important for our collective future as a nation that every minority in India not feel that it is insecure or at risk? Finally, in chapter 7, suggestions are provided for you and your teachers to think about practical components of your course. This can be quite interesting and enjoyable, as you will discover.